Hello again and welcome back to another episode of After the Whistle. Did y'all miss me? I hope you did. But I hope you had a good Christmas. Leading with that first, hope you had a good Christmas with your family. I know I did. Enjoyed seeing some family that I don't see very regularly, probably like a lot of y'all. It's a little bit cold down here in South Georgia. If you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I'm actually losing my voice. So my wife says, thank God. But when you're trying to record a podcast, it's not exactly the best thing to be losing your voice. So I am surviving off of the last couple days. I'm surviving off of the immunity turmeric shots, drinking water, throat lozenges, you name it. So if my voice sounds a little bit off, that's why. This weather change, the weather in South Georgia, if you live down here or have lived down here, as I know a lot of my listeners do, you know the weather down here can be a little bipolar. So one day it'll be 70-something degrees and sunny. The next day, like the last 2 days we've dealt with, we've had hard freezes. We've had temperatures in the upper 20s, low 30s. It's cold for us Southerners. Okay, to all my listeners above the Mason-Dixon line, to all my listeners up north, I get it. I can hear you groaning on the other end of the recording here. I can hear you because you think, oh man, 20s, 30s, that's not cold for us up here. But hey, we call that weather shaming. We don't do that. To us, Southerners, it's cold. And, this time of year, I tend to feel the effects of it a little bit more than most, seems like, so I can get sick from time to time. But luckily, I have a speech pathologist for a wife, so she's coached me through the day as far as limiting my talking, not projecting that much, so not raising my voice, drinking plenty of fluids, and then taking those immunity shots like I just mentioned. Also got this drink from Starbucks earlier. Can't remember what it's called. No free ads, but I understand that, Starbucks makes this drink. It's a mint something. I think it's got some honey in there. It's like a tea. It's like a hot tea, and it worked wonders for me. So that's what I'm surviving on today. Getting into football. I'm gonna try to do a whole episode, and I'm going to try not to project. Not going to try to overexcite myself to where my voice gets up above a certain level. I'm watching my levels here on the monitor, making sure that I don't go over a certain level and completely lose my voice, because that would not be a good thing, especially right here at New Year's with the big games we have coming up. And we got some good ones. First off, I'd like to talk about a few things that have happened since the last time we spoke. Last time we spoke, we talked about the first round of the college football playoff, going through the recap there, with Oregon advancing, with Ole Miss advancing, with Alabama beating Oklahoma, and then so on and so forth. Y'all watch the games as well as I do. We've already recapped those, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole again. What I will say is now we have the 8 teams, the final 8 teams, the 8 teams that I feel like this should have been the playoff. This should have been the playoff all along. Okay, we shouldn't have had to deal with the group of 5 in the first round, and I know I've made my thoughts very clear on that, but this should have been, if we were in an 8-team playoff scenario, this is a situation where I feel like things were right, and we've got Oregon playing Texas Tech, we've got Alabama playing Indiana, Ole Miss playing Georgia, Miami and Ohio State. And I feel like you can genuinely make the argument that these are the 8 best teams in the country. Now, I understand there's probably some other thoughts out there that people might bring up and say, well, I don't think Alabama's better than this team, or I don't think Miami's better than this team, or whatever else. But you can definitely make the argument that we've got 4 really good games lined up for this slate in the quarterfinals. And these are arguably the best 8 teams in the country right now in this very moment. They've proven that to be true. That's why they're where they're at. So we'll get into that here in just a minute. Couple bowl results that I'd like to go over. There's been a couple developments in the portal, some coaching carousel things. I'd like to go over those first, get into the quarterfinal matchups here on the back end of the show. Probably not going to make it a very long, drawn out show due to the nature of my voice. I want to try to preserve it as much as I can to scream and yell at my TV for the next couple days, as I know that y'all probably will as well. So a couple of the games I'd like to go over. Just kind of like a quick hitter segment like I've done time and time again on this show. Talk about a few results that kind of, not threw me aback, but, a couple good games that I've watched. And, if you know the scenario and a little bit of dabbling into my personal life, we're moving in the process of moving back into our house, hoping to be back in it by the end of this weekend. Fingers crossed. That's what we're hoping anyway. And so I've been really busy. Haven't been able to really lock in like I'd like to and watch these games to their fullest. But I was able to catch enough of some of these games to be able to speak eloquently and, speak on them to a certain extent. But one of the games that I watched, and scoring has been at scoring's been kind of weird throughout this bowl season. There's been some games that, we thought were going to be high scoring, ended up being low scoring, and vice versa. Georgia Tech and BYU. Georgia Tech, BYU is a game I watched the other day. Kalani Sitake and BYU, they get the win over Georgia Tech 25-21. And one of the biggest things that stuck out for me is in the latter stages of this game, Georgia Tech is trying to win this football game at the last minute. And the end game, and people can say what they want about Brent Key. They can say, he's a good coach. He instills a lot of toughness. He's this, he's that. He's a good culture guy, whatever else. But if I can put him somewhere in a category, I'd probably put him in. He's one of the worst in-game coaches in the country. If not, that term, I would even make the argument he could be the worst. And I was mentioning this point to somebody the other day and saying that the decisions there in the last few minutes of this football game, Georgia Tech gets the ball back and, is trying to ultimately win the game. And the decisions as far as the clock is concerned, Georgia Tech had a couple minutes left on the clock, very nonchalant. Didn't look like they were getting in any hurry whatsoever. I'm looking on the TV because I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, we got timeouts. You got 3. Like, why not call one, reset? And I understand Georgia Tech's been this team all year. They've been kind of more of a methodical offense with, Haynes King and, that ground game, that rushing attack, whatever else. They've been more of a methodical offense all year. They've been kind of a ground and pound team, more physical up front than some of the opponents they've played. But to not call timeouts and not stop the clock and not reset had me baffled. Had me kind of shaking my head at the TV. And don't get me wrong, I'm the furthest thing from a Georgia Tech fan, but it had me thinking, like, this is the guy that we had coaching openings here within the last month and a half. We've had coaching openings that this guy has been mentioned for. And his name has been mentioned. Like, oh, he could be a good fit at this school. I don't see it, guys. I really don't see this guy. I don't think he's a good coach. I just think he had a really good, he had a quarterback this year in Haynes King that could kind of put the team on his shoulders. And he's recruited some decent prospects in this last cycle. He'll probably get a couple good players out of the portal. But I don't know. We'll see a lot about Georgia Tech, next year with this turnover with some new athletes, same coach. I just don't think he's that good of a coach. I don't think this is a guy for Georgia Tech long term. Georgia Tech, you end the season 9-4 record, nothing to show for it. You didn't win the ACC, your biggest rival. You didn't beat your biggest rival. Didn't win your bowl game. A lot of the boxes that we thought halfway through the season that this team could check. We thought maybe they would make it to Charlotte, play for the ACC. They didn't. We thought maybe with the 8 overtime thriller that we saw the previous year against Georgia, we thought that they would put up a lot better fight against Georgia this year, only able to score 9 points. And then you go to a bowl game against a BYU team that, frankly, I picked you to win, and a lot of people picked you to win because I just thought that Georgia Tech had something to prove. They were going to go out on a high note, 10-win season, finish the season 10-3, one of their best seasons in a long time. And this was going to kind of validate Brent Key as a not an elite coach, but, definitely a top 25, top 30 coach in the country. And now you've fallen off the rock ledge, so to speak, and you've tumbled down now back to where you started the season. That's where everybody thought you were going to be, and that's Georgia Tech football's mediocrity over the last however many years. I mean, Georgia Tech was a good team, 20, 30 years ago, and they've been, yearning for this again, and they just can't quite get there. So it's the most disappointing season to me, 9-4. If you're a Georgia Tech fan, Georgia Tech player, whatever, to me, 9-4 is disappointing. Seeing as where you were halfway through the season, where you were ranked, and you were firmly in the driver's seat to go to Charlotte, and then you just kind of just wither away. And, the loss to BYU is icing on the cake. Now, not to take away from BYU. BYU's still a good team, physical football team. Bear Bachmeier, that team is very good. But, BYU outgained Georgia Tech 425 to 385, so not a big, difference there. Where Georgia Tech really lost this football game is not capitalizing on opportunities, because neither of these teams really pulled away on the metric side of things. I mean, BYU only had 40 more yards of total offense than Georgia Tech. Rush yards, both teams, Georgia Tech at 131, BYU at 100, so not far off there. Penalty yardage, both teams had 49 penalty yards. Each team had 2 turnovers. Each team possessed the ball for about 30 minutes. So not too far off in the metric categories, but Georgia Tech just didn't take advantage of the opportunities, and BYU did. And I feel like BYU's turnovers came at not less inopportune times, but Georgia Tech's turnovers came at times where they couldn't couldn't afford a turnover, so to speak. And that's what ended up, losing the game is, the end-game decision there at the end of towards the end of the game to not call some timeouts, to not buy your team some time to win. I understand that when you get in that situation and you're like, oh, we don't want to give BYU the football back with a minute and a half left or whatever. I understand that to a certain extent. But to just nonchalantly just eat up clock, I think there was a point where Georgia Tech, used up all 40 seconds between plays. And this was 2 minutes and some change left in the football game. I think it was less than 2 minutes, actually. And Georgia Tech ate up almost all 40 seconds, and the clock was running. I mean, I don't understand the coaching decisions, and a lot of that's why you lost. But not to beat a dead horse too much on that, but that's what my thoughts were on Georgia Tech and BYU. Virginia, Missouri didn't really catch a lot of this football game. Watched little bits and pieces of it. Virginia ends the season, 11-win season, big time for that staff, for that team. Missouri just couldn't get anything going on offense, really. I mean, this was a game where we thought, Missouri might be might just run the football, might impose their will. SEC teams been physical all year with Ahmad Hardy, but weren't able to. And when you're, a lot of these games, especially this one, Ahmad Hardy still has 15 rushes for 89 yards. You got Jamal Roberts goes 11 for 56. We kind of expected Missouri to establish the line of scrimmage and establish their will or impose their will, but for them to go out like this is definitely disappointing. Missouri, another team that was kind of in there, ranked higher than they should have been. I mean, I think Missouri's one of those teams where you can say that they're by far and away one of the most fraudulent football teams of the college football season, and they tend to be that every year. But the two areas to me where Virginia Tech won this football game, and like I said, I watched bits and pieces of it, didn't watch the whole game, but was able to watch bits and pieces of it, check the highlights, looked at the stats, looked over the numbers. Virginia Tech was 13 of 23 on third down. Missouri was 3 of 12. Turnovers, 1-1, both teams, white there. And then the possession for a Missouri team that prides themselves on establishing the line of scrimmage, extending drives, and running the football. You would not expect the time of possession, and this is where they lost, by the way. This is the key metric where they lost this football game. 38 minutes and 19 seconds of time of possession for the Virginia Cavaliers to Missouri's 21 minutes, 41 seconds. You're holding the ball for 5 minutes a quarter. essentially, for Missouri. That's not going to get it done. When you're playing a team and a team is holding the ball for 10 minutes a quarter on average and you're holding the ball, they're holding the football twice as long as you. They get more possessions, more chances. It is, at that point, it's a game of numbers. It's a game of percentages, averages, probability, whatever you want to call it. At that point, they've got twice as many opportunities as you. But a real dud of a football game. 13-7 the final score on that one. Missouri still had chances to win it, even with these lopsided stats that I just called out. Still had their chance to win it, couldn't get it done. Eli Drinkwitz, that Missouri staff, definitely have to go back to the drawing board in this offseason, try to figure some things out, because that was absolutely just disgusting. Penn State, Clemson. Penn State beats Clemson 22-10. Last game for Penn State before the new coach and Matt Campbell takes over. I thought I saw a lot of really good things out of Grunkemeyer. Grunkemeyer, the quarterback, I felt like I saw a lot of good things out of him. Outplayed Cade Klubnik. And we'll talk about Clemson more here in just a second, but talking about the good of Penn State, 11-19 on third down, 397 total yards, 260 of that through the air, 137 through the ground, no turnovers, 33 minutes time of possession. Just a really well-played game by Penn State. Clemson, on the other hand, this was a team. These were two teams that a lot of people had picked before the season to be in the semifinals. I even saw some people pick these two teams to be playing for the national championship this year because they were returning a lot of production. Both of these teams, top 10 in the country in returning production from last year to this year. Clemson especially. I think they were, if not the number one team, they were top 3 in returning production. I mean, you've got the guys that they were recruited by Clemson. They've been in the system multiple years, like Cade Klubnik. The coordinators have been there multiple years. There hasn't been any coaching turnover or anything. It's not a team that has been heavily poached by the portal. I mean, these guys have been there. And the questions being raised this week, after this game, the questions being raised, is Dabo Swinney the guy going forward in Clemson, South Carolina? And my answer to that is no. I don't think so. I think the Dabo Swinney thing has run its course. Now, don't get me wrong. You still, as a Clemson fan, you appreciate what he's done for the program because there is no Clemson right now in this very present day without Dabo Swinney. I remember growing up, I remember younger Colby in his early teens and in single-digit ages, 9, 10 years old. I remember what Clemson football used to be. Garbage. And then they hire a guy named Dabo Swinney, and he takes this program to new heights. And the reason that we're disappointed in Clemson finishing 7-6 is because the standard and the bar has been set so high by Dabo Swinney. So Dabo Swinney's slander by Clemson fans is absolute lunacy. Don't get me wrong. You can criticize your coach. When he makes decisions you don't like or when he does things you don't like, you 100% have every right to criticize the coach. But you can't sit here and be like, oh, Dabo sucks. Dabo's this, Dabo that, whatever. That man brought you multiple national championships. That man recruited some very elite talent that's producing very well in the league. They will build a statue. Excuse me. I'll probably be doing that a lot over this episode, but they will build a statue for Dabo Swinney in Clemson, South Carolina. Might even name the field after him at one point. I don't know. But for what he's done for that program, he's established Clemson football where he's at this point in his career. I just think his refusal to adapt, his refusal to change his ways and do things the way that they need to be done in today's college football landscape is what's going to be his downfall. I think ultimately Clemson's going to move on from Dabo Swinney. I don't think it's going to be this offseason because there's really nobody out there available to replace him. That Clemson waited a whole coaching carousel cycle. If Clemson was going to let Dabo Swinney go, they'd have let him go a month or so ago when there were still candidates good candidates out there on the market, but they're not. So now I feel like Dabo Swinney's going to go another year with Clemson. Well, everybody will see what happens, what happens with Clemson next year. I think that'll be the telltale sign of if they keep him. And now if Clemson goes out next year and wins 10 games, I think he's there for sure. But a lot rides on next season. I think Dabo Swinney's entering next season firmly planted in the hot seat. So moving on from that, I have a friend of mine that's a Clemson fan. He wanted me to talk about that a little bit because he says that he's tired of seeing Clemson fans just absolutely just throw shade at Dabo and all this. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of shade that is being thrown at Dabo over the last, year, this college football season. There's a lot of shade that's warranted. It's definitely something that I can see some validity in, but you still got to remember where he brought you from. He pulled you out of the muck and brought you to where you're at. And the standard in Clemson is ACC championships, national championships, 10, 11 plus win seasons. And that's because of that man. It's not because of anybody else. It's because of that man. So, you got to kind of play, not ride the fence there, but you got to kind of list. You got to think about it from both sides of the coin, so to speak. You got to think, this year sucked. Clemson had high expectations coming into the year. A lot of the media had high expectations. I had high expectations for them. I had them in my preseason playoff prediction. I had them in there. So the fact they're not there, is it a coaching problem? I think we'll give it another year. We'll see where this train goes. If it goes off the rails, if it stays the course, if they correct things, whatever, we'll see moving on to next season. LSU loses to Houston 38-35. This was a game where I thought this was going to be more of a low-scoring affair, but this game turned into a more or less a Texas shootout, so to speak. I thought both teams played really well. Didn't watch a whole lot of this football game, though. LSU, just the penalties, man. The penalties were just aplenty. 95 yards in penalties, 21 minutes time of possession. Third down, they weren't that bad, 7 of 12. They made decent of their opportunities, but they gave Houston converted 32, or Houston had 32 first downs. Let me get a sip of water really quick. But Houston had 32 first downs. Ole Miss couldn't keep Houston from converting, really. They were really good on third down. 437 yards of total offense, 200 of those being on the ground. Not penalized very much, almost 39 minutes of time of possession. And the argument, and I've seen the memes, I've seen the SEC memes, it just means more. It means that they're losing all the... Don't get me wrong, there's no defense. I'm firmly rooted in SEC country. I'm down here. I root for an SEC team. But you're not going to catch me on this show defending the SEC. These are two of the most preposterous and just disgusting performances from teams SEC teams that are supposed to be line of scrimmage teams. You're getting outpossessed 38 minutes or almost 39 minutes to 21 and a half minutes. If you're LSU, Missouri, same thing. You're getting outpossessed, getting outclassed. And a lot of people can make the argument, it's because of NIL now, it's because of the transfer portal, it's introduced a lot of parity in the sport, the talent is more spread out. Yeah, I understand that, and I think there's definitely some points to be argued there. But I just think LSU was just not that good of a football team. And I'm not saying that Houston's not. Houston beat them. It's definitely a win to be celebrated. Anytime a team like Houston from the American Athletic Conference, or not American Athletic, but anytime a team from Houston, beats LSU, it's a celebration. Should be. Because, you don't get that opportunity very often to beat an SEC team that is a storied program that we've seen have some success over the last 5 years, with winning a national championship in 2019. So, Houston played a heck of a game. And, didn't watch much of that one, wasn't able to catch a lot of it, so can't really speak on, what I saw. because I just, like I said, wasn't able to. Busy, family, holidays, everything else. So y'all get it. All right, moving on. I'm going to talk about one thing, then we're going to get into the quarterfinal matchups here in just a second. Give my predictions. I've already given you my predictions because I've already given you my bracket. So you already know where I'm going with these games. But I'm going to go through and break down the 4 games that we have coming up over the next couple days. First off, I'm going to drink a whole bottle of water during this show. I got a feeling. First off, I'd like to point out that I had to sit down and think about this because coaching carousel. We had a lot of coaches change hands. We had to rank. I wanted to rank based on the influence, based on the coach. I wanted to rank my top 4 hires in this coaching cycle for the respective schools. I think the undisputed number 1 is Lane Kiffin to LSU. I think he's going to do great there. I think given the resources that LSU has to offer, the fact that LSU is willing to come off their wallet and spend the money for the players, and just the fact that I think he's a genius when it comes to offensive scheme, I think LSU is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Now, he's going to get his players. He's going to get, the people in with the way the portal is nowadays. He can pull in whoever he needs to pull in. I feel like there's a lot of players that, are in the playoff with Ole Miss that are going to go to Baton Rouge for next season. I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to speculate. But I just have a feeling that you're going to see it, not a mass exodus, but you're going to see a few players, maybe a handful, that are going to leave Ole Miss to go to LSU to be back with Lane Kiffin. But I feel like that's the slam dunk number 1 hire. I think if we get that one out of the way, and my number 2 is this is where some people kind of disagree with me on this. But if you've listened to this show since I started this show, and we're on episode number 67. And no, I'm not going to do that stupid whatever thing that all the kids are doing with this. I'm not even going to say it. But we're on episode 67 now. If you've listened to all 67 episodes, you've heard me mention the name Kyle Whittingham at some point when there's a coaching opening. You've heard me mention it when the Florida job opened, when they fired Napier earlier in this season. You've heard me mention it other times. I've always been a big Kyle Whittingham fan. When he was at Utah, I like the culture that he represents. I like the fact that he's a line of scrimmage guy. You're going to get a hard-nosed defense. You're going to get a running game. Here's the thing why I think this is a really good hire for Michigan. And it's not just the fact that I like Kyle Whittingham, I like his scheme, I like him as a person, any of that. It's the sheer fact that Michigan, over the last 4 or 5 years, has dealt with so much crap. You've dealt with the Connor Stallions thing, with the sign-stealing scandal, cheating scandal, whatever you want to call it. You had Jim Harbaugh, who, to me, I'm sorry, scumbag. I've never liked him. And then you've got Sharon Moore, which we won't go into all the details on that situation. I understand if you're a college football junkie like I am, you know about everything that there needs to know that you need to know about that situation. So you know what's going on with that. It brings in a balance to this program. I feel like the hire of Whittingham brings in a balance because he's a no BS guy. You know what you're getting with Kyle Whittingham. He's 66 years old. He's an older guy. He's been around the block. Not a big social media guy. Not a big he's just going to put his head down, and go to work. Day one. You're going to get a physical defense. You're going to get a physical football team. You're going to get a running game. You're going to get a guy who, to me, he's what that program needs right now. And yeah, they signed him to 5-year contract. And, you reevaluate it after 5 years and see where you're at. There's been some talk like, I think he's too old, whatever. You can think whatever you want. But you look at Nick Saban coached into his 70s. There's nothing to be said that Kyle Whittingham can't do the same. But he's what that program needs. So that's why I got him at number 2. It's not just for the fact that I think you're going to enjoy the product that he puts on the field at Michigan, but you're also going to enjoy the fact that Michigan fans, you can sit back, and we don't have video on this podcast, but you can see me. I'm sit back in my chair, and you can breathe a sigh of relief. Just, you've got a guy that's not going to cause any drama. There's not going to be any drama involved with Kyle Whittingham, and that's a good thing because you've dealt with it. Over the last 4 or 5 years, you've dealt with plenty of it. You don't need any more. You need a guy that's just going to come in, establish his culture, and move forward. Put everything behind you. Connor Stallions, Jim Harbaugh, Sharon Moore, put everything behind you and move forward. Number 3, and I think this was a slam dunk hire by this school, but Virginia Tech hiring James Franklin. Slam dunk. I'm talking like between the legs windmill dunk hire for Virginia Tech because Penn State didn't think James Franklin was good enough for him. Whether or not you agree with that or not is beside the point. Whether or not I agree with it is beside the point. I think they jumped the gun a little bit. I think the fact that the guy was in the playoff, made a deep run last year. I think that, the fact that he was just a couple plays away from playing for a national championship last year, and then you cut him loose, a little bit premature. But the fact that you get a arguably top 15 head coach in the country, and yes, I just called James Franklin a top 15 head coach because he is. You've got a top 15 head coach now at a program that's not a top 15 program. I mean, it's not like he went to Michigan. It's not like he went to LSU or even Florida State or even Florida or wherever. He didn't go to any of those schools. He went to Virginia Tech. So for Virginia Tech to punch above their weight class, so to speak, and get a coach like James Franklin in Blacksburg, just clap, round of applause. Phenomenal. Phenomenal hire. Great. I think he's going to do great things there for that football team. I think the culture that he's going to establish, the players he's going to bring in, we're already seeing a lot of Penn State decommits. Don't be foolish and think those decommits aren't looking at Virginia Tech. I think they are. And Virginia Tech's not, too much behind a lot of these other schools. I mean, yeah, they're not on the level of an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan or a Georgia or whoever you want to name. They're not those upper echelon type schools, but who's to say they can't be made into that? And I think they got a great guy to do it. Number 4, my final, coaching hire that I think to round out my top 4. If we're talking about James Franklin at Virginia Tech, we got to talk about Matt Campbell going to Penn State. Now, like I said, whether or not you think that James Franklin's not the guy for Penn State or wasn't the guy for Penn State, it's beside the point. But Matt Campbell's been a guy kind of like Kyle Whittingham over the last few years. Every big job that I've seen open over the last few years, every time, I'm like, Whittingham or Campbell? Why are these guys not getting calls? And Matt Campbell's been a guy, you look at what he's done at Iowa State. I mean, and for a while there's been some coaching cycles that have we've seen some coaching cycles go through. There's probably been some schools called him, and he just hasn't gone. He's wanted to stay at Iowa State, but when Penn State comes calling, you answer that phone. And now he's there, and I feel like it's a home run hire for Penn State. I feel like he's going to do great there. Same thing. A lot of these coaches, not so much, Lane Kiffin. I don't think you can make the culture argument with Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin's more of a tactician. He's that guy that's going to, bring in, LSU. One of the biggest gripes with them this year was the offense, stuck in the mud offense, couldn't really do a whole lot. You're bringing in a tactician, a guy that's going to produce points. He's going to produce offense. He's going to get the players to do that. And then retaining Blake Baker as your DCs, just going to be icing on the cake. You're still going to have a quality defense, but you can also have Lane Kiffin calling plays, have Lane Kiffin's offense there in Baton Rouge. It's going to score a lot of points. But you can't make the culture argument because it's not like Lane Kiffin's not exactly the poster child for culture. So let's not get into that. But what do 2, 3, and 4 on my list have in common? Culture, culture, culture. Kyle Whittingham, great culture. James Franklin, great culture. Matt Campbell, great culture. and you're going to see a culture shift at those three institutions. Michigan going to be completely different than what we've seen under Sharon Moore. Probably even different than what we saw under Jim Harbaugh. Like I said, no bull, with that guy, with Whittingham. Same thing with James Franklin. Establish that culture at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, if James Franklin coaches at Virginia Tech for 10 years and he wins 10 games, 8 of the next 10 years, they'll build a freaking statue for the guy in Blacksburg, right outside the stadium. Just a big old bronze statue out there. Because they've never, I mean, even when Frank Beamer was there, they didn't win at that magnitude. They won. But if James Franklin comes in, say 10 years, say he wins 100 games or 95 or 97, 98 games, he'd be the winningest coach in Virginia Tech history. So great hire for them. Also Matt Campbell, for reasons I said, just going to establish a great culture. Also another guy that doesn't put up with tomfoolery. He's going to do the same thing at Penn State, that he did at Iowa State. He's going to work. He's going to have the athletes. Very quiet professional is Matt Campbell. He's not the very flamboyant coach. He's not all this. He's not all that. But he's going to work. He's going to work hard for your program. So that's my top 4 coaching hires of this cycle. Another thing I'd like to mention too, South Carolina's going to catch a stray here before we get into the quarterfinals picks. South Carolina's going to catch a stray here. I see South Carolina fans all week this week, and I had to jump on here and say something about it because y'all came after me on social media. So I've got to respond. South Carolina's announced they've re-signed. Dumb. I can't stand that. I can't stand these Instagram posts. Sorry. I can't get too worked up. Remember? Don't want to raise my voice too much. But I can't stand these graphics that we're seeing on Instagram. We re-signed Lenore Sellers. We re-signed Nick Harbor. We re-signed Dylan Stewart. This ain't the pros, homie. This is college football. If a player don't want to be at your institution, why you got to re-sign him? Was he thinking about leaving? Did Lenore Sellers go to Shane Beamer and say, hey, coach, I got an offer for $3 million in Miami. If y'all can match it, I'll stay. Is that what happened? Is that what happened with Dylan Stewart? Is that what happened with Nick Harbor? I think the main thing that I don't understand with South Carolina fans right now is I don't understand why you're so excited. I don't. I put a post out there, and I'll go over it. Let me get a sip of water while I pull it up, and I'll go over it and see what y'all think of it as well. So South Carolina's announcing they're returning all these guys. They're re-signing all these guys: Sellers, Harbor, and Stewart. And I said, so they're bringing back the same guys that they went 4-8 with. Because correct me if I'm wrong, these 3 players played. Sellers, Harbor, Stewart. They're bringing these guys back. You went 4-8 with that roster. Ooh, calm down, Colby. You went 4-8 with that roster. And like we're all of a sudden now supposed to just like bow down to the king in Columbia, South Carolina. Like, oh my gosh, South Carolina's going to be a force next year. They were supposed to be a force this year. The year before, last year, people were actually making arguments for them to make the playoff. And then the talent that they had coming back, we knew they had Sellers coming back. We knew they had Stewart coming back. And everybody thought, oh man, South Carolina, they might be a sneaky little playoff team. They might be a 10-win playoff team or whatever. They might, could compete for the SEC, whatever. You go 4-8. 4-8, bro. 4-8. With that roster. And this just further just proves the sheer delusion that exists in Columbia, South Carolina. Delusion. Spiderwebs in the trophy case. No reason for you to be excited about this. But here we are. So congratulations, South Carolina. You're bringing back the same guys you went 4-8 with. I guess you're going to go 4-8 again because your coach sucks. So there's your common denominator there. You got a guy like Lenore Sellers. You got the talent like that. You got a talent like Dylan Stewart. You got a talent like Nick Harbor, and they're not producing. What's the problem? Move my chess piece. So, South Carolina fans, your move. Come at me now. All right, so quarterfinals matchups. Got to get into them. Got this Tennessee-Illinois game pulled up, too, while I'm recording, and Illinois is beating Tennessee 10-7. Oh, what's going on with these SEC teams? Oh, well. Anyway, moving on to the quarterfinals. So, we're going to start things off with a game that I'm definitely looking forward to, but Miami and Ohio State. We played tonight. I'm recording this on Tuesday night, but it will be Wednesday when y'all hear this. So we'll say tonight being played at 7:30 on ESPN. We've got Miami and Ohio State. There's a couple ways I think this game's going to go. And the last time we saw this Miami team, they, beat Texas A&M. Last time we saw this Ohio State team, we saw them against an Indiana, a physical team, and got beat. The area of concern for me, for Ohio State, is Ohio State has played. This will be Ohio State's third top 10 defense that they've played this year. They've played Texas, and they've played Indiana. They scored 14 points against Texas, and they scored 10 points against Indiana. So it's not exactly they're just far and away so much better than everybody else. When they run into a good defense, they sputter a little bit. And with the talent that they have, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, these guys that they have, it's like, how in the world can you not manufacture more points than 10 points or 14? It's because they run up against really good physical defenses, and this kind of stuff happens. Well, they're going to see another one. They're going to see another one tonight. They're going to see a team that's very physical. We watched this Miami team against Texas A&M. We watched Akeem Messidor. We watched Ruben Bain just live in Texas A&M's backfield. Can they do that against this Ohio State front? And I think a lot of Ohio State's success in this football game, if they have success, is 100% based on, can they block those guys up front for Miami? I think that's a big if, because we saw Texas A&M struggle with it. And A&M's got one of the best offensive line units in the country, if not the best. You could make the argument they have the best. And we saw that team struggle. Ohio State's offensive line is not better than Texas A&M's. Oh, gosh. Can't believe I said that. Ohio State fans are going to be mad, but they're not. This Ohio State offensive line is good, but they're not on the same level as that Texas A&M O-line that Miami just, had their way with. So Ohio State, it's going to be a game to me where I feel like it's going to be whatever team wins this game is going to have to take advantage of the most opportunities, because there's not going to be many of them, I don't think. And Miami, on the other side of this coin, when you talk about Miami, yeah, they have the more experienced quarterback, but do they have the more talented quarterback? And yeah, I understand they have Malachi Toney. I understand they have Mark Fletcher. I understand they've got the key pieces. They've got the weapons. But Carson Beck hasn't looked that good. I mean, there's been times this year where he's looked okay, pedestrian, and it's just like, is he going to be, what Carson Beck are we going to get in this football game? And that, I feel like a lot of Miami's goals, beating Ohio State, going on to the semifinals, and, a lot of it rides on Carson Beck. We haven't seen that much from him. So, to me, when I draw this game across the board and I look at Miami and Ohio State, Miami's defensive line, Ohio State's defensive line, who do I give the edge to there? Miami's D-line versus Ohio State's O-line. Who do I give the edge to? I give the edge to Miami there. Ohio State's D-line, Miami's O-line. I give the edge to Miami there too. Skill players, give the edge to Ohio State. I mean, don't get me wrong, Malachi Toney's really good. But I give the edge to Ohio State mainly because of the fact that they've got two really good options at the receiver position in Tate and Smith. And then, to me, quarterback, I'd have to go with Julian Sand. Just based on what I've seen this year. Yeah, I know Carson Beck's more experienced. He's, been there, done that. But we've got to remember that he just made his first playoff start last week. And he got bailed out by a really good defense and a couple really good players in Fletcher and Toney. So I'd have to pick Sand. I'd have to swing Ohio State's way when I'm picking quarterback. So to me, it's going to be who can take advantage of the opportunities. And I still think that Ohio State, and I haven't changed my mind, I still filled out a bracket, y'all. I gave y'all a spoiler here. So, this is I still got Ohio State in this one, but I've got Ohio State in this one. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think they're going to have to earn it. I've seen some people say that Ohio State's going to blow Miami out. They're going to beat Miami like 31-13 or 31-17. It could happen, but with that defense that Miami has, I just don't see it happening. Now, the area of concern for me is the corner for Miami that would be covering Carnell Tate is hurt. So now you're on your third corner, not third string corner necessarily, but a rotational guy is now being tasked with covering Carnell Tate. That's why I think Carnell Tate's going to have a really big football game, and that's why I think Ohio State's going to take advantage. There's going to be a lot of attention on Jeremiah Smith, and I think that the difference in this football game is Carnell Tate and Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs, the quarterback of that defense for Ohio State, I think he makes a couple key plays, and then I think Carnell Tate does as well. I think Ohio State wins this one. I've got Ohio State winning this game 17-13. Low-scoring affair there in that matchup in the Cotton Bowl. All right, so moving on. New Year's Day. I have 3 matchups on New Year's Day, and we'll start with the other game that I'm most intrigued by. And not to say that I'm not intrigued by the other two, but, another game that's going to be a big one. All 4 of these are going to be big ones. But to me, one of the games I'll have my eye on the most is going to be Oregon and Texas Tech. Because Texas Tech, this is their chance to prove we're not just a Big 12 team. We can play with the big boys. We spent all this money. We got all these athletes. We got these guys. We got Jacob Rodriguez. We got Baron Morton. We got all these players. And we can play with these guys. So Oregon, played JMU. Oregon was able to get, a little bit of the rust off, which there wasn't any really, but Texas Tech, with this long layoff, because we haven't seen them play since December 6th, I think. This layoff that they've had, how does it affect them? Because Texas Tech's never been here before. Never been in this scenario in the playoff. So Oregon on the other side of this thing, last year, Oregon had the layoff. Oregon got beat. So now Texas Tech's got the layoff. Oregon's coming in the more fresh team. Oregon's got some key pieces back from being injured, DeCorian Moore being one of them. And, that to me is going to play a key part in this game. Now, Texas Tech, with what we've seen them do this year, the only game they lost, their quarterback was hurt. I understand, we can make the excuse there. They still lost the game, but we can also make the excuse that, hey, there's not a lot of teams that are going to win that game without their starting quarterback. Now, you would hope that a team with the talent level of Texas Tech would be able to beat Arizona State, but they weren't able to. So, unfortunately, that's where they land. But Texas Tech, I've seen this game picked a couple different ways. I've seen some people swing Texas Tech's way, some people swing Oregon's way. I think the difference in this game, for me personally, is going to be Oregon and their playmakers. Kenyon Sadiq, DeCorian Moore, Whittington at running back. When you have these key pieces, can't even forget Dante Moore, who you can make the argument is the best quarterback in the playoff. When you've got these key pieces on offense, this Texas Tech defense, we've seen them. You can make the argument this is the best defense in the playoff. Statistically, I understand that. But that's going to be the big matchup. Oregon's offense and skill position players and Dante Moore versus this Texas Tech defense led by Jacob Rodriguez. and David Bailey. That's going to be the key matchup here. Can Oregon establish the line of scrimmage? Can they drive? Can they drive the football? Can they run the football? Because if Oregon comes out of the gate, first quarter, Oregon comes out of the gate and is able to just run the football into the teeth of this defense, it might be a long day for Texas Tech. But if Texas Tech does not allow Oregon to establish the run, then we could see a little bit that I feel like that plays right into the hands of Texas Tech. I feel like that plays into that game that they want to play. They don't want to turn it into a track meet style game. They want their defense to really be the unit that they lean on, the most. Now, make no mistake about it. Texas Tech is able to, they've been able to score points this year. It's not like they're a low-scoring team with a really good defense. They've been able to score points. Baron Morton and that offense have been able to manufacture points when they want to. But the question's going to be establishing drives, skill positions, and I think the layoff has a little bit to do with it. I think the fact that Texas Tech hasn't played in nearly a month, I feel like that is the reason they come in a little rusty. I feel like that Oregon jumps on them early. I feel like that Oregon jumps out to a little bit of a cushion, and I feel like Texas Tech's never able to recover. And I've got Oregon winning this football game and moving on to the semifinals, and I've got Oregon winning this one 24-20 over Texas Tech. 24-20. So, over and under is 51.5. I'm kind of betting a little bit on the under point total on that one. So, might eat my words on that, but that's my kind of high risk, whatever you want to call it, hot take bet of the week is that one, is going 24-20 Oregon over Texas Tech. All right, so Alabama and Indiana, and I've seen all the headlines. I've seen the people talk about Alabama in this football game, and we saw a version of Alabama against Oklahoma that if you're Indiana, I feel like you kind of may be a little uneasy about it. And what's up with Indiana fans? Like, all of a sudden now, Indiana has a couple winning seasons. All of a sudden, I'm seeing Indiana fans all over social media. Like, I didn't even know those folks existed. And now, all of a sudden, I'm seeing them everywhere. I saw a clip the other day of, it's like the Indiana boys or something like that. There's like 3 dudes doing a football podcast about the Indiana Hoosiers. Like, where did y'all come from? Like, and they're also, it's a tough listen, by the way, in case you want to look up their clips. It's a very tough listen. I would highly suggest just watching the clips on their social media. Don't go down and listen to the 40-minute episode or whatever else. I mean, I honestly think they should make podcast equipment more expensive, and they're the perfect proof of that statement. They're terrible. So, and you can clearly tell they're not used to winning. They're not used to playing winning football. They're not used to talking about football. So, terrible at it. But back to the game. Get off my soapbox. Get back to the game. Don't want to get too worked up about that. But Indiana and Alabama is a very, the old beard stroke of the beard, very intriguing matchup here, because I could see a world where Alabama wins this football game. I've seen the arguments made by certain college football personalities like Brandon Walker and like a couple others that Alabama's going to win this football game. I've seen the arguments. I've heard the arguments. The biggest concern for me for Alabama is the same concern that I've tried to drill into y'all's heads over the last month and a half, pretty much the whole season. Just, it's like every time we turn around, y'all are hearing me going, Alabama can't run the football. Now, didn't seem to bother them against Oklahoma, but Oklahoma really wasn't that good of a football team. Now, I picked Oklahoma to beat Alabama, but I felt like that was as far as Oklahoma was going to go, because Oklahoma was kind of that one-dimensional style football team. They played really good defense, and other than that, other than them playing really good defense, that was it. John Mateer wasn't really that guy. Looked a lot better earlier in the season. Didn't end up being, all he was talked up to be. But, Alabama's able to beat them and advance past them. But the concern here is an Indiana team that is bought and built by Curt Cignetti to play very physical, hard-nosed defense. And that's what they've been. They're a top 10 unit in the country. We saw what they did to Ohio State. Ohio State's got 3-4 times, maybe 10 times better of an offense than Alabama does. And we watched what Indiana was able to do with them. And I think we see something very similar to what we saw in Indiana and Ohio State in that game. I think we see something very similar in this Indiana and Alabama game. Because I don't think that either of these teams is going to score 30 or 40 points. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you see is kind of like a similar thing that I had when I referenced Miami, Ohio State. I feel like both of these teams' offenses are going to have to earn every inch because Alabama, defensively, Alabama's not a bad football team. When you look at that defense is a unit. Like when all those guys are healthy, Tim Keenan and all those guys, that is a unit. They're a really good unit. So it's going to be defense on defense. To me, it's going to be whose offense can take advantage of the other team's defense more. And, with Alabama's inability to run the football, I think the issue here is going to be that Alabama's going to have to rely on Ty Simpson to win them the football game. And I trust Fernando Mendoza. I trust Elijah Surratt. I trust Omar Cooper. I trust them more than I trust Alabama's offense. Mainly because Indiana can run the football. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to come out here and run for 200 yards against Alabama because Alabama is still a formidable team against the run as far as their defense goes. So I'm not going to say that Indiana's going to come out here and just run the football down Alabama's throat. But they're going to run the football just good enough to open up the shots down the field or the intermediate passing game to guys like Surratt and guys like Cooper. So for that reason, I'm going Indiana in this one. I'm going Indiana tight in a tight contest, 20-13, Indiana over Alabama. I just don't think Alabama can manufacture points. I don't think they're going to be able to manufacture points against this defense when you're not able to run the football. And I think that's where this game falls. Is I just think Indiana is a little more balanced on offense, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. All right, so Sugar Bowl time. Rematch of a game we saw earlier in the season. We've got Ole Miss playing Georgia in New Orleans. This is the same building where Georgia's season ended last year against Notre Dame. We're seeing a similar scenario last year. Georgia won the SEC. They come in as they come in with a first-round bye. They go into the Sugar Bowl. We saw the same scenario last year play out. We saw a Georgia team that showed up to that Notre Dame game. Now, granted, they did have the backup quarterback that was Gunnar Stockton at the time. Had the backup quarterback in. Weren't able to manufacture a whole lot on offense. Looked very rusty. Didn't look like the more physical team. Notre Dame was clearly the more physical team last year. So it's been said all week, talking about the similar scenario here of Sugar Bowl, first round bye, Georgia, same as last year. And what I've been noticing is the players, Gunnar Stockton, a couple other Georgia players that were on that team last year have talked about it left a bad taste in their mouth. To be able to go to that game last year, to go to that stadium and their season to end the way it did. I feel like Georgia, you see a little bit more of a driven football team. You see a little bit more a team that's going to come in and be a little bit more focused. And then a common opponent in Ole Miss. We've seen this game before earlier in the year. Georgia, to me, is playing better football than when they played Ole Miss the first time. I don't think the same argument can be made for Ole Miss. They look to be playing about the same style of football they were playing when these teams met last time, and Georgia has elevated, and Ole Miss has just kind of tracked along the line there. But I will say this, Trinidad Chambliss got to be the most dangerous quarterback in the playoff. I know I just said, Dante Moore's probably, and you can make the argument Dante Moore's the best quarterback in the playoff. Trinidad Chambliss by far the most dangerous because of what he's able to do with his legs. And we saw some of the things he did against Georgia in their last meeting in Athens. We saw what he was able to do with his legs and what he's been able to do a lot with his legs this year. And, a lot of people are saying, that's the big question mark. How does Trinidad Chambliss play? Because this offense for Ole Miss just completely revolves around him and his level of success and what he does. That's what's going to drive Ole Miss. Now you got Kuan Lacey, one of the best running backs in the SEC, who was virtually shut down. I think he had like 30 rushing yards the last time that these two teams played. I think 13 carries, 31 rushing yards, or somewhere along those lines the last time these two teams played. So, he was a non-factor the last time. And that's when Georgia wasn't really playing their best defensively the last time that these two teams played. So I don't expect that to be any different. I don't feel like Ole Miss is going to be able to run the football downhill at Georgia. Ole Miss is going to have to get creative if they want to move the football. They're going to have to get Trinidad Chambliss in space, options, this, that. They're going to have to take some shots. You're not going to intermediate and dink and dunk this Georgia defense to a victory. It's not going to happen. The path to victory for Ole Miss is very simple. You've got to produce some explosives. And as luck would have it, this is a top 5 offense in the country in explosive plays. Plays of 20-plus yards. Ole Miss is in the top 5 in the country in that regard. So Ole Miss is going to have to produce some kind of explosive plays to keep Georgia on their heels and keep them from just playing their game. Georgia wants to line up. They want to out-physical you. They want to beat you. They're not a finesse team. You've got to finesse them. You've got to out-finesse them. A lot of eye candy, a lot of shots down the field. Take your shots. Get creative with your run game. Don't try to sit there and line up in the I formation and just try to run it down their throat. That's not gonna work. Better teams that run the football better than you have tried it this year and haven't had any luck. So you're not going to do that. But you got to get creative if you want to win this football game. Likewise, on the other side with Georgia, it's been reported that Colby Young will be back for Georgia, which is great for them. He was their leading receiver until he got hurt against Ole Miss in the first contest. Ole Miss people remember him very well. And I feel like that brings a little bit of depth for this Georgia receiver room and this group. I think it adds another target. We've seen the emergence a little bit, of Noah Thomas in the latter half of the year for Georgia. We've seen him be able to make some big plays, and he's been a little banged up over the last few weeks. But, obviously you got Zachariah Branch. You got Colby Young back now. You've got a full contingent of these receivers. Gunnar Stockton has a really good rapport with Colby Young. I think that'll be a little bit of a difference maker in this football game. I just think across the board, I think Georgia has elevated their football game, or they've elevated their game. Ole Miss hasn't really. They're about the same team they were the last time these two teams met. So I have really no reason to believe that Ole Miss can win this football game. Now, can they? Yes. I think for reasons I said a minute ago, if Ole Miss is able to come out, move the football, stretch the field, produce some explosives, get a turnover or two, definitely possible. But if you're just going to line up and try to beat Georgia at Georgia's game, that's not going to work. And I think of all the 4 games that we're going to watch over the next couple days, this game has the most blowout potential. And hear me out. And I'm not saying that Georgia's going to blow Ole Miss out. But what I will say, this game has the most blowout potential. I feel like Alabama and Indiana is going to be a pretty close game. I feel like Oregon and Texas Tech going to be a close game. And I feel like Miami, Ohio State's going to be a close game. I feel like this game of the 4 is the game that I could see Georgia. I could see a world where we look up at the final score at the end of this game, clock hits 0, and Georgia's won this game 31-17. I could see that happening. I could see a game where it's close at halftime. Maybe Georgia's winning 17-10 or 17-17, or maybe it's tied at halftime or something. And I see a world where Georgia would make some halftime adjustments and end up pulling away in the second half and winning by a couple touchdowns. That's actually my prediction. Georgia 30, Ole Miss 17 is my prediction on this football game. I feel like Ole Miss, with all the – I didn't even mention the fact that, we can talk about they don't have their play caller. You can say what you want. I heard what Pete Golding said after the game talking about, this Charlie Weiss's offense. Dude, shut up. That's coach speak. Lane Kiffin was calling the offense. Don't get it twisted. Lane Kiffin was calling the offense. But I feel like the fact that Charlie Weiss will be in Baton Rouge next year. You got a lot of these coaches that are going to be in Baton Rouge. There's some of these players that are going to be in Baton Rouge. You can't tell me they haven't already thought about it, because the portal window is opening here in just a few days. You can't tell me they hadn't already thought about it. I feel like the distractions are a big negative for Ole Miss. And I feel like that is ultimately, the distractions, and plus the fact that I just feel like Georgia's elevated their game and gotten better since the last time these two teams played. I don't see this game. I see it being competitive for a little bit, but then I feel like Georgia makes the necessary adjustments, pulls away a little bit, wins this game 30-17 there in the Sugar Bowl, which would set up a Georgia-Ohio State semifinal game and an Oregon and Indiana semifinal game. Hope I'm right. Maybe I am. I'm going to go now, and I'm going to get some rest. I'm going to rest my voice, drink some water, throat lozenges, turmeric shots, whatever I got to take. I'm going to try to get this voice back where it's supposed to be, because I want to recap these games for y'all the first part of next week. After these games, I want to talk about them. I want to talk about going forward. We got the semifinals. There's a lot to talk about, and I like to talk, and I need a voice to do that. So thank y'all for hanging out with me here on After the Whistle. It's been a joy again. Episode 67 is now in the books. Be sure to tell your mom and them about the show. Get them to listen, and I'll catch y'all next time. See y'all.